Ultimately, Mr Speaker, when we look at the cost of living crisis in its total, when we look at it in its entirety, it exists because of decisions taken in this place. The reason people can't afford to pay their energy bills is because decades of incompetence on energy policy from this place. The reason that people can't afford to pay their mortgage bills is because the Tories crashed the economy. The reason that people can't afford to pay their food bills is because Brexit pushed up the prices delivered by politicians in this place, Mr Speaker. And we've had enough of it, Mr Speaker. We've had, of course.
I'm grateful, Mr Speaker, for the honourable gentleman giving way. He spoke at length about energy and never once mentioned oil. He represents Aberdeen North. I wonder when the government's bill on oil and gas licences comes to this chamber, will he stand up for his constituents of Aberdeen South and vote with the government, or will he support the SNP position, which is to turn their back on oil and gas workers?
Mr Speaker, the honourable member for Murray is always one for detail, but I represent Aberdeen South, not Aberdeen North. But Mr Speaker, I think it's just 7 days. It's just 7 days since the government announced 27 licences for offshore oil and gas, and now they've came forward with a proposal to do so on an annual basis. Now, what I would like to see, Mr Speaker, as I hear the honourable gentleman chuntering for a sedentary position, like a wee daftie, Mr Speaker, if he was to choose to listen, I will get to my point. What he knows, I believe, is that there has to be an evidence-based approach to oil and gas extraction, an evidence-based approach which is anathema to this government. What we need to be considering is our energy security. What we need to be considering is our commitment to net zero. What we need to be considering is jobs and opportunities. And of course, what we need to be considering is that investment in renewables going forward. Now, what I would like to see the government do, and I'm sure the honourable member would agree with me in this regard, is obviously to ensure that the pre-existing licences for the likes of offshore wind, where the government has failed, we see improvements to ensure that that actually happens, Mr Speaker. Now, the people of Scotland, when they're looking at this and they see the cost of living challenges and they know that it emanates from the decisions taken in this place, their minds are very much refocused on the fact that where power is devolved, Mr Speaker, power is retained. And what we need to see, what we so badly need to see, is the powers over our economy, the powers over energy policy, the powers over employment law transferred from this place to Holyrood. And here's why, Mr Speaker, because when we look at the record of Holyrood in comparison to this place, the difference could not be starker. If you're a young person in Scotland, you'll be born into a baby box. If you go to nursery, you'll receive 1,140 hours of care. If you go to primary school, you'll get a free school meal. If you go to secondary school and want to go to higher education, that will be paid for you. If you then enter the workplace in Scotland, if you become a nurse, you'll be paid more than you are here. The majority of Scots pay less tax than those in England. On your council tax, you'll pay less than those living in England. You'll be able to get crisp, clean water included as part of that bill, Mr Speaker. Of course, if you want to be in a situation... Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman is very keen. Would you like to rise to his feet?
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way again. He's spoken a lot about economic growth. I wonder then, does he agree with several SNP backbenchers that there should be no place in the SNP Scottish Government for the Greens because they're anti-economic growth?
Mr Speaker, I believe I was talking about nationalised water in Scotland. Now, it's not just nationalised water in Scotland, it's of course the fact that our railways are nationalised as well. If you want to open a business in Scotland, you'll have access to the small business bonus, and as you get older, you will be able to live in comfort knowing that you'll have access to free personal care. All those things have came about because those are our values. They're tangible and they're real, and what the Scottish Parliament has done is deliver them. And what is going to deliver next is that council tax freeze. A council tax freeze which comes in the face of some Labour councillors in Scotland advocating for a 32% rise in council tax, because only the SNP, using the powers that we have, are protecting the Scottish people during the cost of living crisis, in stark contrast to the failing establishment here in front of us, Mr Speaker. But of course, it's not all bad news, Mr Speaker, because we do have one glimmer of hope. The fact that this is not just the Prime Minister's first speech. It's the Prime Minister's last King's Speech.
File of the House of Peter Bolton.